We are live.
Oh, excellent.
All right.
A little early.
A few slight, better late, better early than late, I guess you could say. And so, guys, we have a pretty fun, kind of a different, would you say, Jason, execution this week we're covering. But for those guys who are, big followers of the brand, there's always a ton of questions that come up in these Q&As we do about you and your, what we like to call audio journey. But we were kind of talking about it earlier this week, and you had mentioned, or it had come up, road to shit, and I thought that was hilarious. So really, we're on the road to shit. We're about to jump on. We're in our cars. We're about to start the journey. So, uh, speaking of journeys, Jason. All right. First, I think maybe it would be good if we just start at the very beginning. Were you born and raised in on the West Coast here, or did you start somewhere else?
Yeah, actually born and raised in LA, well, in the LA area. My parents, they originally lived in Manhattan Beach, then they quite ridiculously moved to San Fernando Valley. It's like, I don't think I ever let them live that one down. And they had all your typical, parental, things, their rationalizations. It's a small house, it's, et cetera, et cetera. I'm like, dude, you're like 1 block away from the ocean, and you moved to the San Fernando Valley. So that was my start. So if I'm still a little bitter about that, well, hey, I like the ocean.
Yeah, the ocean's nice and it quite hot up here. I mean, we're looking at. I'm pretty sure you've been experiencing 100-degree days like the rest of us, but right now you're in Texas, right? A lot cooler there, I'm assuming.
At the moment, yes. I was informed by one of our employees today that this is fall, and fall lasts typically 18 to 36 hours. So that's actually what I understand. They're like, oh, this is weather is great, and it's a beautiful day today. It's like it's 80. It's not very not very humid. The sun is out. It's shine, sun shining, everything. And like, yeah, get used to it. It'll last today, maybe tomorrow, and then it's back to summer. So yeah, okay, I get it. It's been 100 plus in the valley, so I know how it goes.
So, what would you say was the first thing you encountered in your life that inspired your love of audio?
It was actually less audio. It was more gadgets.
Mm.
Um, I love to take things apart, electronic things, which is it's somewhat amazing. I'm not dead because I started taking things apart like when I was 4 or 5 years old. We're talking things that plugged in the wall. And there are probably some people actually saying, "Oh, I wish he had, grabbed onto that third rail back then we wouldn't have to listen to this." But uh, anyhow, I took apart a lot of audio gear. My dad, much to his chagrin, I took apart a portable reel-to-reel tape recorder that he brought home from work, and one for doing like memos, and that was great. I remember that he was not happy about that at all, because that was a fairly expensive device back then. And then I took apart like basically anything I can get my hands on, old TVs, whatever. Like I said, it's amazing I'm not actually dead. So for me, it really started with technology. I was really fascinated with electronics and how it worked and all the cool looking, little stuff inside of electronics. It was, for me, it was cool looking. And that's how it started. I really wasn't into audio until much later. Not quite high school, but much later.
Uh, were you still tinkering with gear throughout high school? Like, did you? What was your favorite thing to do while you're in high school? Gear? Did you play sports?
I was starting to actually get into building some electronics, really simple stuff. But the main thing I was still taking things apart, and I discovered audio, and I remember my first moment of like, oh, this is interesting. I had a clock radio. I'm sure well, some people remember those ones, little flipping number, type clock radio.
Oh yeah.
And I would listen to the radio. Yes, like actual radio. We're not talking streaming. This is not super advanced stuff. But I noticed that if I put like a can over the little speaker on the radio, suddenly it had a lot more bass. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting fact. You know, of course I don't know why it's doing that, you know, at the time, but it was interesting, so I experimented with that, and that's kind of probably why I ended up in speakers to start with, you know, during college. But that was kind of the first aha moment, and then I had one later with Sumo.
Did you apply to a bunch of different colleges? Or had your heart set on just one path for yourself?
I applied to a bunch of them, and my parents were very clear. They were like, we said, you got accepted here, 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 here. We can afford to send you to UCLA, so that's where you're going. No, I didn't really have a choice. It was like, that's it. And I'm like, that's cool. Perfectly fine school. And I decided to do engineering for a simple reason. My dad was an engineer, and I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. I mean, I think a lot of people going to college probably don't quite know exactly what they want to do. And I'm like, we'll just do this engineering thing. I understand you can make decent money. You know, people always want engineers. Let's do that, right? And that's kind of how I got into engineering. So it really wasn't like the love of audio and the love of gadgets hadn't like actually coalesced yet. And that's how I got into the path. Everything changed later.
What do you think was kind of like the biggest thing that you learned while you were at college? I mean, there's a lot of people talk about taking all these courses that don't have much to do with their major. What did you take away from college in general, do you think?
On the electronic side, quite a decent amount, but you know, mainly in the labs. I had my moment of total panic because I had a very, very easy professor for like kind of essentially their beginning electronics, which was a 300 level class for engineering. And then they continued analog electronics on the 400 level, you know, senior level. The senior guy was the hardest guy in the school, second hardest guy in the school. So I went from the easiest to the hardest. And the first day he's like, well, you know, I've drawn a circuit. Clearly this is the input impedance. Clearly this is output impedance. Clearly this is the gain. This is all clear. And I'm like, no, that is not clear at all. I have no idea how you can just look at that and get that. And so I spent a good month actually getting kind of caught up to that class's level. And in the end, you know, it's all good. I mean, I've got my, you know, engineering diploma, summa cum laude, you know, blah, blah, all that stuff. It sounds all impressive until you realize that my GPA in my English minor was actually higher than engineering. So there you go.
And this has been echoed by a lot of guys in the industry. Did you feel like high-end audio or high fidelity audio was even a path? Like there's like the standard, like there is no major for hi-fi audio anywhere, right?
No. There isn't, and actually, I wasn't even aware of it. In college, I would actually I bought electronics. I started with like a Sony receiver. I moved to SAE products because they were on closeout at one place, and I was able to get a pretty cool SAE integrated. And the logical path seemed to be speakers. You know, speakers were kind of fun, so I started, you know, doing speakers while in college. That was the first kind of thing, and you know, I was 100% total hardcore objectivist back then. It's like, how much power does the amp put out? What's the THD? Okay, well, I'm going to buy for the, you know, the highest numbers you can get and the highest power you can get. You know, period, because everything else doesn't really make a lot of sense. And if you looked at the mainstream magazines of the time, you know, Stereo Review and stuff like that, that's really that's what was communicated. That was absolutely the mainstream. Everyone understood that, and that's the way it was. And that's why I did speakers, because speakers actually were different. Speakers had, you know, a lot of they had a lot of interesting things you could do. We were fairly simple-minded, so a lot of the reasons we got into speakers were I thought most of the current speakers were ugly, and the friends that I started the first speaker business with, they also thought they were hideously ugly, boring, and antique, and so we decided to shake it up a bit with these weird pyramidal stepped, things that were painted with Zolatone. It was like a flecked rock-like finish, very 80s. And that went over about like you'd expect. Most people are like, these things look weird. I will not have them in my house, and this is not this is not interesting to me. So the speaker thing ended up not doing so well, but it's how I got into audio.
Okay. Before I know someone always ends up asking about the amp. Are you drinking right now? Speaking of college, what kind of beer
Oh,
are you drinking?
that's a local brewery, Lorelei Brewing.
Hmm.
Um, they have a beer called Mare Dude. Yes. So, Lorelei's a mermaid thing. Mare Dude is it's kind of it's a heavy stout like beer. It's a coffee stout. So, hopefully it'll keep me awake and happy. So we'll see.
And what would you give it on a scale of 1 to 10?
I usually do 0 to 5, and this is a 5.
Oh,
I get this one quite a bit. I like this beer a lot.
okay. So for those kind of guys who are in college right now, there's a lot of the headphone guys who love high-end audio in college. Looking at what advice would you give to them if they want to get into audio? Because right here, we were just saying you were in college. How did you get your first job? Sort of looking to get into it.
Well, I got my first job at Magnavox APS company, which sounds real promising. It's like Magnavox, right? No. This division of Magnavox was a government contractor. We did spread spectrum communications equipment and stuff like actually kind of cutting edge stuff for its time. But we didn't really do consumer audio. The best thing is if you want a Magnavox gear, you could get a heck of a discount on it. My advice to anyone wanting to go into audio is I would say do it. There's never a better chance than right now to actually do it. You can actually start a company. You can sell direct to consumers. You can actually build up essentially a real functioning actual company easier than any time, pretty much ever. So a good example is David of Snake Oil Cables. David is a younger guy. He was out of college a few years back, and he kept saying, "Oh, I want to do cables. It's kind of interesting. I have this great name. I want to do it." And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll buy some. I mean, our current supplier can't keep up. So if you want to make cables, please make cables. We will buy them." And so he did, and I mean, kind of long story short, he has a cable company now that is actually a viable, real company, with a name, and all it took really was him saying, "Hey, I would like to do this," and he did it. If you're going to do electronics, it's a lot more difficult. But if you want to do electronics, pay attention to the labs. Take the analog electronics and digital electronics both. You'll need them both. And then build as much as possible. Go to DIY audio, see what people are building on the analog and digital side. Choose a few things, build them up, see what you find wrong with them. Things will go wrong when you build things. You'll either mess up soldering, or there'll be something kind of weird about the product because DIY stuff may not be entirely baked. A lot of it is very, very good and is going to be totally stable, but you might run into something. Pay attention to that. See what you want to do, and then the best thing is just go ahead and try it. It's very easy to set up a e-commerce site now. It's very easy to give it a shot, and that's kind of like Schiit. Schiit was a shot. I didn't know that it was going to be a success.
Looking where you are now, as a young person entering where you are now, what would you say is the most difficult thing that you've had to do in terms of managing shit as a company?
Oh boy, managing the growth, managing essentially moving from a small company where you're building the product, you know, either you or you and a friend are building the product, to something where you actually have management. You know, you have guys who are making the plans. You know, guys who are like overseeing. You know, either vendors or employees, et cetera. It's a very different ballgame, and you may decide you don't want to be, you know, as big as we are, or you know, you may decide that we're a lot, you know, we're far too small for what you're shooting at. It's it's the evolution. I mean, right now we're still evolving because not a day goes by when I don't go to Alex and say, well, you know, why do we still have supply constraints? You know, why do we still not have enough stock? And it's like, well, you know, the plan has been for X units. You know, our demand is X plus Y, and then we moved it to X plus Y times 2, and now it's actually X plus Y times 3. So we can't actually keep up. Or, you know, the vendors have a problem, you know, either we can't get a part, or, you know, things are just slow for kind of unexplained reasons. There's a lot of kind of supply, you know, everyone hears about the global supply chain, and there's still a lot of that kind of percolating, you know, through the system that makes things more complicated right now. But it'll work its way through. You know, everyone will get their, you know, their Ford Broncos, and their, oh God, what's been out of stock forever? Their Sagas, eventually. Right now, it's like, I know it does feel like forever, but we will get there.
Okay, question. And we're gonna pause this journey because I want to ask this question to you because it's a little hot on my mind. Okay, someone on the YouTube channel is asking, can you ask Jason why he prefers Yigi more is less over less is more? So somebody's paying attention because I was involved in that. I actually want to know.
Yeah, I've actually been thinking about that myself. And I have not actually spent any more time with more is less or less is more or OG here in Texas. I've been actually working on smaller products and also kind of figuring out some of the folk vonger stuff, because I didn't want to let that sit, you know, for a month while I'm here. And one of the explanations I can think of, I don't think this is a cop out, is I tend to like more disturbing and unsettling music. I mean, look what I chose as the test track for that. It's Wall of Voodoo, Back in Flesh. It's not a, you know, calm, happy, you know, single, you know, woman's voice and, you know, guitar type of thing. It is an extremely disturbing track. So maybe, just saying, more is less. You know, more. It's kind of disjointed and disturbing. You know, presentation was more what I like, but I don't know. I'd have to spend more time with it. I still do think I like more is less, but I need to spend more time with all of them, and we'll see. When I'm back in California, that's one thing I'm going to be playing with. I'm also going to be talking to Mike and saying, hey, you know, okay, so if you don't like more is less, what can we do to improve it? I know that there are some extreme constraints on what we can do with it, so I don't know. But I know Mike has been like, you know, I'm least happy with that one, and I'm like, I'm most happy with that one so far, but we'll see how it goes.
And to provide a little context for those people there, you guys recently hosted a shootout for the release of the in 3 new flavors. So the top deck that you make, different flavors, less is more, the OG, and more is less. While we're here, do you want to explain what the difference between the 3 is?
Real simple, yeah. Less is more is the least expensive Iggy. It's based on 16-bit DAC chips. Now there are 4 TI DAC 8812s in it. Mike has said, you know, I really like that one. A lot of people seem to like it. I believe it is currently out of stock, so a lot of people must really like it. There's more is less, which is a lot of people are like, oh, well, more measurements, less good. I'm like, no, no, no. It's more better measurements for a lower price than the original Iggy. So hence more is less. More is less uses four TI DAC 11,001s, which are like a super high performance 20-bit DAC. Somewhat akin to the ones used in Iggy OG, which is the next one, but with a sample and hold, so it actually has much better measured performance, at least through much of the audio band. That's the one I liked. And then there's Iggy OG, also known as Iggy Analog 2. That's the same one we've been making. Price has gone up a bit because the chips are a lot harder to get and they're more expensive. And so we decided to release all three because we felt, after doing literally 10 Iggy versions, that these three were the most interesting, and that we keep getting, instead of a consensus that this is clearly better, we'd have like Bob likes this one, Doug likes this one, and you'd have to look at what system they're using to actually understand why. And so we decided to release three flavors, including the one we've been making for a while, and two, less is more, and more is less. And that seems to have gone over fairly well. Some people think it's fairly disturbing that we're not saying this one is clearly better, but I know Mike, and Mike will never ever say something is clearly better unless he really absolutely believes it.
So now we're going back into the timeline. We're graduating college. Jason, college. You work at Magnavox.
Mm-hmm.
What was next for you? What was going on during that time period?
Working like a dog, because I had Magnavox and I had our speaker company, Odeon. So I would literally go to work at Magnavox, make money, spend all the money on the speaker company to get started, because we made our own cabinets. Those of you who have actually made your own cabinetry know that is completely insane and probably not a great idea. Well, we were weird, and so that's what we did. So I was working literally 12 to 16-hour days, all the time, to try to get this company started, and also to, do my job at Magnavox. That's when, I kind of started realizing this Magnavox thing is not really all that interesting. It's a long drive. It's defense contracting. It's a lot of stuff I can't talk about. And I started looking, like what other jobs are there out there? One of the reasons I got the Magnavox job is, then this might be surprising for some younger engineers, there are engineering gluts from time to time. And I came out of school during a time of an engineering glut, as in there were like not a lot of jobs. I mean, seriously, I had classmates who went on to actually sell cars, because that was much better than going into engineering at the time. So I started looking, at other options, and there's this ad. I remember it very, very clearly because it's like Sumo, basically the Sumo, slash MCS, which was the name of the parent company. We want an engineer to be part of our engineering team, and I'm like, I know Sumo. I've seen their stuff at Roger Sound Labs. I've seen their stuff in the stores. It's like, that's an audio company. I could do like real audio stuff. That'd be kind of fun. And so I went and interviewed, and they, long story short, got the job, went to work, and quickly realized it's like, no, they don't want someone to be part of the team. They want someone to be the team. And I went from like, literally at Magnavox, it was like, this is a computer. Spend 3 weeks getting used to it, and then maybe we'll have you do something to, at Sumo, it's like, okay, this is your first day. By the way, our production line is shut down because the MOSFET matcher that the previous guy here doesn't work. It's broken. There's no documentation for it, but can you make it work so we can start up the production line again? So I walk into this place where literally there's about 20 ladies outside staring at me, going, when are you going to fix the MOSFET matcher? And that's when I'm like, boy, maybe I should have stayed at Magnavox at that point. Sumo was a different experience because it was really like I started kind of as the chief engineer and became VP of engineering really quick, which didn't mean a whole lot. There were 3 engineers there. It wasn't that big of a deal. But I was able to actually do some really cool stuff. I was able to do my first amp designs. I was able to expand their product line, into believe it or not, we were doing modular preamps. We were doing upgradable DACs. I mean, this is, it sounds familiar today. Sounds like Sumo, right? Yeah, well, we were doing that in like 1990 and 1991. So that's what I was doing, just working like crazy.
But it was also around this time that your Schiit partner,
Mike.
Schiit, your partner,
Yeah, Mike.
Schiit.
Mike is a character. Sumo used to be part of a company called Caliphone. Caliphone decided they didn't want anything to do with this high-end audio stuff, so it basically ejected Sumo. The former president of Caliphone took it, and we moved it to another place. I went with the company. And we ended up moving literally right next to Theta Digital, where Mike Moffat was doing his thing. And that's why I met Mike. The reason I met Mike was really, there was a sales rep who visited both of us, and she'd say, hey, you should meet Mike, he's a character, he does stuff like you do. And I'm like, I don't know about that. Theta, they do that expensive stuff, I don't know about that. That's like super hyper cost. We do cheap stuff. I don't see what we have in common. But she persisted. We met. We hit it off because Mike's like, oh, you do the cheap stuff. I'd like to do some cheap stuff. I'm like, that's interesting actually. And that's actually how I ended up doing the Cobalt 307 for Mike. That was an inexpensive DAC that was kind of a sub-brand of Theta, and I think some people out there still have them. I do hear about them from time to time.
So between Sumo, at some point you actually worked directly for Theta as well?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're working for Sumo. We got Odin. We got Theta. How? For those who don't know, you also owned an advertising agency at some point. How did that come about out of Sumo in these situations?
Sumo was going in some weird directions. The principal of Sumo wanted to go and do like tube amps, which I had no interest in at the time. Theta was also going in some weird directions because I think Mike's partner wanted to chase the super high end because at that point, right then was where essentially the market diverged. Suddenly, you had Theta, which had huge technology, packed into a DAC. I mean, it was completely insane stuff with 3 Motorola DSP chips in it, all this custom firmware, etc. You had that, and that was $4,000 or $5,000, which is a lot of money. But then Mark Levinson said, we'll throw some ultra analog things in a box with a standard digital filter, and we'll price it at $16,500. And Mike's like, yeah, that's stupid. Why would you do that? It's neat looking, but who cares? Mike has never really cared about what things look like. And we saw other manufacturers kind of moving that way. Krell decided to do their reference standard at that point. $32,000 monoblock amps, things like that. And Mike's like, I don't know. Audio's getting weird. I don't know if I want to be part of this. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know if I want to be part of it either. And Mike's like, hey, let's do maybe like some surround sound stuff. I'm like, that's cool. You have fun with that. I know that's going to be a lot of work. Me, I like doing the marketing for Sumo. I like doing the marketing for Theta because I was doing a little bit of that. Why don't I just start a marketing company, an ad agency, which is it's a bit different than engineering. And yeah, we starved for a good year, but we actually got a niche pretty quickly. It's like we called ourselves like the technology agency, because I could go in, talk to the engineers. If it was actually a technology focused company, I could actually talk to them in their language, and they'd be like, oh, dude, seriously, don't hire any of these other crazy latte sipping, dudes. You got to hire Centric, the name of our agent. You have to do that because they totally get us, and they're going to do a good job. And in some cases it worked, in some cases it didn't. But we actually, ended up with quite a decent agency that lasted, over 20 years, which is a huge length of time for an ad agency. And we did a lot of first kind of stuff. One of the, some of the earliest websites, some of the earliest e-commerce. We did the first, what was it? Oh, first online leasing thing, which was way more complicated than e-commerce. Did virtual world stuff, for all sorts of wacky companies, including like HP. We got mentioned in MIT Tech Review, and actually got an article in MIT Tech Review. I went and spoke at Harvard about, virtual world stuff. It was neat, it was fun, but it was always completely crazy, and I really, kind of missed building things. I think that's why I ended up coming back to it eventually.
I think the best way to segue into obviously the next evolution was the company you're at right now, Schiit Audio. But I guess one of the questions I wanted to ask you is about why the name Schiit. I think everybody understands that it's a little bit risky, right? Yes, it's vulgar, but to me, the higher arching thing is that there's risk involved with a name like that. It could be rewarding, but it also have some backlash. How did you kind of decide that you wanted to assume that risk yourself?
Yeah. Well, almost 20 years, and well, not at that time, 16 or 17 years of the agency business gets you lots of meetings where you show an amazing idea, and the client goes, that's nuts, that's beautiful, I'm going to do it, that's great. And then a day later you get the call, it's like, yeah, well, I actually showed it to the VP and I showed it to the CEO, and they have concerns. And it's like, well, you said you wanted to get noticed. And they're like, well, no, we want it edgy, but mainstream. It's like, no. You can't do that. You cannot do that. If you want to be edgy, you have to be edgy. And so after getting that thrown back my face for many, many, many years, when my wife very frustratedly said, you always have, you're always saying, I got too much shit to do. I got to do this shit. I got to go out in the garage and work on this shit. She's like, why don't you just call the company Schiit? And I'm like, that is the dumb. Wait, no, it's an interesting idea, because we don't have any money to do advertising. We don't have any money to really build a brand. It would be really unexpected. It would be unforgettable, and it would be completely congruent with a whole bunch of stuff that I've proposed in advertising and got shot down. You know what? This time we're gonna be Schiit, and we'll see how it goes. I don't know, But then again, I didn't know how big we were gonna get.
So setting out on this path, you did not think the company would get to the point where it is right now? Or what when you walked into this? You're like, okay, it's a hobby. Well, it was really a hobby for you. You'd already done it once. You're looking at it, it's like potential in the market. Is that why you chose to go? Because here's two things to think about. One, in the beginning, obviously you chose headphones over loudspeakers, which you had more experience in, right? in the high-end 2-channel realm, as we call it, right? And decided to go in a range, at least in the beginning. I think that there was a lot of products that were like around 100 or 200 or 300, which in audiophile terms is absolutely the budget realm. Why those two routes for this company?
Well, number one was I was using headphones. I was using headphones to write. In addition to all the other crazy stuff I do. I'm also a published novelist, kind of not really active anymore, but I've had 3 books published, and probably about 30, 35 stories published in various magazines. So I put on headphones to kind of drown everything out, and so I could write. And I was given a little tube headphone amp from another manufacturer as a gift, and it's like, oh, this is interesting. It does sound different. That's kind of fascinating. I wonder if we could do something better than that. And I wonder if we could do something better than that is probably the genesis of most companies. So that's why headphones. Also, why headphones is you can play a lot more. Speakers, if you actually want to do a credible speaker amp of mid to high power, it is going to be a really kind of one of 2 topologies. It'll be like a Lin style topology if it's Class A B, or it will be a Class D. Today. That's basically it. That's going to be 99% of what's out there. Some people will be able to do Class A, but it's going to be huge. It's going to have significant drawbacks, or there might be a tweak on one of the parameters, but they're still kind of the same. Now, a headphone amp. Oh, you want to do single-ended Class A? Sure. You want to do no feedback? Sure. You want to do op amp? Sure. You want to do like a little mini speaker amp? Sure. You want to do something that's completely nuts, like a Circlotron? Sure. You can do all that. There's a lot more freedom, and that's why we actually kind of got into it, and that's why we kind of started out with a no feedback headphone amp like Asgard, and a all triode no feedback headphone amp Valhalla. And that's why we did what we ended up starting out with, and things are very different now, of course.
On the Facebook page asked, why the Norse name? Why do you name all your products after Norse? Are they gods or just every character out there, I think?
It's okay. It's real simple. Norse naming because it's cool. It sounds cool. Remember, we're Americans. Our knowledge of Norse mythology is probably 98% Marvel movies and 2% looking stuff up on the internet. So if we offend someone who actually knows something about this, I'm sorry. But the names are cool. Also, the Norse named everything. They named their gods, they named their places, they named their things. There's a million names. There's a lot of really cool stuff to pull from. And it kind of went into this pseudo-Germanic, cleanly kind of thing that we started out with. And I know Norse is not German, and I'm learning more about that. But it's cool, and there are a lot of names. That's why, and so we've kept doing that, and we have not exhausted the names.
Okay, so now we're kind of, anything else you wanted to add before we move into the general Q&A about Schiit or the direction of Schiit or your life in general? One of the questions that came in about your life is, what do you think is the most significant technological innovation? Guys, big words, small words for me, would you?
Yeah.
What is the most significant technological innovation in audio since you became an electrical engineer, and why?
Oh, well, let me cover one thing before we get to that. I mentioned I was hardcore objectivist, and that's why I did speakers, because there was change, and then I had my other audio aha moment a little later, and that was when I was at Sumo. When I was at Sumo, I had Carver amplifiers. If anyone remembers those, they were very high spec, very high power, but very lightweight and very inexpensive audio power amplifiers. I chose them because they had a lot of power, and because Carver had a very, very good spiel about why you want a lot of power. And that's great. I mean, he had some really interesting stuff. It was amazing what they did with basically a transformer hooked up to a dimmer switch. Look it up. If you're an engineer, you'll see what I mean. Um, anyway, so I had those amps, and the president of Simo said, "Hey, you want to take home one of our Andromeda tubes at the time?" And I'm like, "Huh, okay. You got this brick. It weighs like 50 pounds. It does 200 watts per channel. Who cares? I got these little lightweight things. They do 350 watts per channel. Clearly better. We're fine." I'm like, "Nah, I'm not. I'm good. I'm good. It's fine. I don't need that." And eventually he wore me down. I'm like, "Fine, I'll take one home." I hooked it up to the speakers we'd been prototyping. One of the reasons my parents used to love me so much is I used to do the prototyping in their living room, like as in including cutting and sawing, like MDF. So yeah, they really love me. But we were prototyping these new big speakers, and I'd been using the Carvers, and so I swapped it out. And my friends who are partners in the business, they came by, and they're like, "So what's that?" And I'm like, "It's this new amp." They said it's weaker than the Carvers. It's probably garbage. I turned it up and I went, "Oh shit," because it sounded not only completely differently, it went a lot louder, a lot cleaner. It literally started knocking pictures off of walls, which the other amps, had never done. It was literally that run in from the other room moment, for everyone going, what is going on? And I'm like, huh, okay, so maybe specs aren't everything. And that's kind of really what led down this path. Because we do stuff that's very high spec, by conventional standards, and we do stuff that's very low spec by conventional standards. A lot of it is an exploration to see what can we do with this. I don't know, and in some cases just for fun. It's like tubes can be fun if you're into them. If you're into buying different tubes, trying different stuff, that can be a lot of fun. So we do tube stuff. And we also do stuff that you can just turn on and use for years and never think about it. And I think there's room for both of those.
Had you not started Schiit, what do you think you'd be doing now?
Okay. Probably retired. No kidding. The agency biz is getting old. And it's a young dude's game, or a young gal's game, or a young, whatever's game. It's a young person's game. How's that? And people start getting skeptical when you get older in the agency biz. So there's a time to step out. So I probably wouldn't be doing anything. It was fine. I did well at the agency. Didn't really need to do shit. But this is fun. I would much rather do this than sit around driving a golf cart or whatever the heck you do when you're retired. I don't know anything about that.
What do you think the chances of started a wine and or beer company?
Fairly high, and I probably fail at both. The saying about wine, right?
What's that?
Best way to make $1 million in wine is to start with 10 million. Because you really are probably like one bad harvest away, from very bad things. If you don't have a real comfortable, pillow to rest on. It'll be interesting. I'm going up to Texas wine country here this weekend, so I get to see what that's all about. That's actually somewhat fascinating. Brewery, I am actually an investor in a local brewery in California, so that's not out of the picture. But brewing, if you're in it for big bucks, you're doing the wrong thing. It's really more about being part of the community, being the cool place to hang out. It's really not. I mean, if you get bought for $1 billion, sure, that's great. But guess what? Most of them are. So, but I probably would have tried it. Who knows?
You were just mentioning Texas. One of the questions we got is of an Austin, Texas shitter. That's the retail space you guys have. What about Austin?
Pretty decent, actually. I know Tyler wants to do it. Right now, I don't know if he's actually gone up and looked at spaces yet, but that would be the next thing. I am going to visit another audio company that's kind of in the Austin-ish area just to say hi when I'm, up there. But they're more hill country-ish. So, but that's not, so we put a shitter there. That's just to say hi, I like your subwoofers, that's about it.
This is kind of an interesting question. How did your earlier engineering career inform your marketing career? And how did your marketing career inform then how you decided to market Schiit?
Great question. The engineering career informed marketing career largely because of our targets. We found an underserved market. We found technology companies that, usually a technology company, and we're talking like hardcore, technology. We're talking B2B. We're not talking, Google or, someone, making phones. We're talking B2B technology. They're really underserved on the agency side. We could do a lot of really cool stuff with them. And we got to do some wacky things, for companies that did, crazy stuff like atomic force microscopy and picoforce measuring systems. And, it was a lot of fun. I learned way more about airplane rivets than I ever want to. But the thing is that I was able to understand what they're doing, what they're trying to say, and actually to kind of filter it down. A lot of engineers are kind of pretty bad at, like, you tell them, oh, what's great about this product? And they give you a list of 78 things. And the three really critical things are number 54, 62, and 77. And it's like, no, we need to kind of do that. And we literally had some stuff where we had a company making the only product that measured what needed to be measured for a specific, semiconductor node. And they're like, well, but we have to, get the brand in and talk about performance. I'm like, guys, literally, the ad is this simple. If you're doing this, you need this done. And they're like, well, it can't be that simple. I'm like, it is absolutely that simple. So engineering can inform marketing. Marketing can inform engineering. It's like, what would I say to Lorelei when, okay, this is their can. They clearly went to, the top branding agency here to, like, say, hey, you should write it on, in blue marker, by hand. I'd probably say, hey, you might want to actually have a brand, and they do. They actually do have a brand, and they are in stores. So it's really interesting. They're not looking for my input, and I'm not looking to get back into marketing, but marketing is important. It is not necessarily a slimy thing. It's like what you need to ask yourself is, how do I clearly communicate what's good about my product? You don't need to be, crazy over the top about it and invent a bunch of, word salad, stuff that people don't understand. But you can actually, use it to say, these are the top three things. These are the top three features or the top three unique things, and this is why you might actually want this. That's really valuable. And if there's some engineers out there who want to start a company, I would say definitely it's worth thinking in those terms, or having someone on your team who can think in those terms. It's quite important to be able to communicate that well. And even though Schiit has not spent a lot of money on advertising, we have a strong brand just because we're dead consistent. I've written most of the stuff for Schiit, and I've done most of the graphics and stuff. So things are really, really consistent, for better or worse. People know what they're getting into. Maybe that's shutting us out of some new markets, but on the other hand, it's very comforting to know, if I go to the Schiit site, this is what I'm going to get. If I get a product, this is what I'm going to get. But definitely it's worth thinking in terms of marketing as well as engineering.
Actually, we had both the graphics question and the copy question asked. So it is that you do a lot of the website writing, you do a lot of the website ads and things of that nature. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I've done all the writing for Schiit and most of the graphics. Of course, our photography is done by a real photographer. I'm not a real photographer. I'll limit that to, I take pictures of boards from time to time when, it's like we didn't get one out to actually have photograph. But the thing is that our photographer knows this is our visual look, this is what we want to do. The guy who actually manages our website, he knows, this is how we want things to be portrayed. Everything is quite intentional. It's like, you'll notice like we have all of our products listed and then prices, and it's always in ascending order. It's because I want people who are not familiar with us to be able, if they want to, see what they want to get, they can go and take a look and say, oh, okay, I'm looking at kind of like, I'm looking at a magnet, or I'm looking at an Yggdrasil. I don't know. If you're looking for something that costs $400,000 or $40, yeah, we're kind of bummed. But other than that, we do have a fairly wide range.
There is a surprising amount of questions about this. Did you also do the logo, the Schiit logo? Was that your design, or did you outsource that part?
Yeah, that took about 10 minutes because I realized we actually needed to have a logo to put on a silk screen on one of the products, and I'm like, okay, maybe like a circuit boardy looking thing, which didn't work, and then it's like just a stylized S, that sounds good. And that actually became the Schiit font, which is used on the the front of all the products for the product names, but nowhere else. And yeah, so I did all that. That's still my fault, or depending on your perspective, it's my fault or it's my work.
What spatial audio DSP room correction? Is it the modern day quadraphonic sound, or is there something really to, or is there really something? Would Schiit ever consider incorporating something like this into a future product?
I think depending on the room, there can absolutely be something to it. I've used it in home theaters, and then I've always ended up turning it off. But notice home theaters, meaning well-damped room, right proportions, carpeted, dark, dead. You don't really need it that much. If you have a bright and non-standard room, oh yeah, I'd probably consider using it. In fact, at the house here in Texas, we're using a Ragnarok 2. We're using a Bifrost 2. We're doing a 2-channel, not home theater, but 2-channel, viewing system, and Zoo Audio speakers. And in the room, which is very bright because it's like it's tile and glass and stuff like that. The zoos were fairly horrible. We threw a Lokius in there. It's great. All it took was just pull up the 2K, pull down the 400K. It was absolutely fine. So if you can do that with a Lokius, you can do the same thing or better, with digital room correction. I do think a lot of people go too far and they try to correct every little lump and bump, in the room, and that, I don't know. I've never heard those sound particularly good, and that may be why I ended up turning them off in the home theater side of things. But there's room for it. I don't think that we'll do it because when you start doing it, you start talking about user interfaces. Is it a touch screen on the product? Is it a PC-based piece of software? Neither of those are real interesting to us, so we won't be doing those.
For all the questions about what I'd like to call where's my we got a lot of where's my shit questions. We got a what's up with the shit questions. Of all the product questions out there, Jason, there's one that is popping out unique to this thread. I wanted to ask you, does Schiit plan to phase out the Gunyer? DAC updates seem to be focused on Bifrost 2 and the Yggdrasil at this point.
No.
Side note, since the Bifrost 2 has a remote, it would be extremely nice for more expensive DACs like the Gunyer and Yggdrasil to have one too. So we got two questions. Can you give us an update on the Gunyear, and what about remotes?
Agreed on the remote. I would not be surprised if you saw an upgrade at some point for the Iggy that actually added a remote. It may end up being a different chassis. The Iggy chassis is very difficult to build. It's something that we've been looking at for a long time. We've been looking at making it a little smaller, etc., but still using all the same parts, so it's still upgradable. Don't have a firm answer for you on that, but I do agree it would be a good idea. Gunyear is not going away. We do understand that a lot of people do buy for form factor. Gunyear is exactly the same size as Freya, which is one of our top selling products. It's exactly the same size as the Loki Max, which is coming out. It's exactly the same size as Erd. So it's not going away. I think the question is, does it become a 2? In other words, like a Bifrost 2, where we move to a different platform, or does it get upgraded? And right now we're still discussing that, but we haven't given up on Gunyear. It's just, Mike and team are working on some bigger things. So I've been patient with them working on things, but I've been talking with them, and they all understand that like it'd be nice to actually have an update for the Gunyear as well as Iggy. It'd be nice to actually have Iggy stuff available in a more timely manner, and we're working on that. I don't think the Iggy less is more back order will be anywhere near as long as what we're expecting, but we have a very conservative person setting up the back order times now. So we're trying to beat every single one of them, and we don't always, like with Hell and Fulla, but those are imminent. But we are trying to actually make sure that you won't be disappointed with the time if you order.
Yet for Volkswagen, how do you say Volkswagen?
If we're
My
real
Norse
lucky,
mythology is a little.
well, Folkvanger is I like to call it the fancy Valhalla. If Valhalla is In-N-Out Burger, Folkvanger is Umami Burger. That kind of, it's you have to be picked to go to Folkvanger, whereas like Valhalla, if you die in battle honorably, you get to go to Valhalla. Folkvanger, if we're very lucky, before the end of the year, we will have Folkvanger. I am actively working on that. All of the issues have been addressed. Now it's kind of like wait for the metal, see what it looks like. If the metal is not messed up, if things all work, then end of the year we absolutely are in good shape. And that'll be a fun product. I actually want one on the desk here.
You may have spoken about this before, but what is that given it like compared to the rest of the products?
It is exactly the same size as a Freya.
Okay.
But 1.875 inches taller. So it's 2 7/8 inches tall, but it's exactly the same width and depth as a Freya. It's a new form factor for us.
Okay. We're getting through the questions here, but just a couple more.
Mm-hmm.
Someone writes, I would love to hear more about the upcoming TYR amp. Tired?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some
Tier.
tier?
Yeah, that's what we call it. We may be wrong.
Yeah. Maybe some projected specifications and how you feel it compares to the sound of some of your older designs. Also, I like this question. Maybe what kind of mind when you were designing it? When you design a product, do you have a sound in mind? Is there some type of directional EQ curve that you...
No, you just see what you get, and then you tweak it in the direction of more accurate, typically. Tier, specs-wise, it will be definitely 200 watts into 8 ohms. I don't know if it'll be 350 or 400 watts into 4 ohms. Who knows? There's lots of losses when you're dealing with a choke input power supply. We're trying to get it to 400. I will let you know shortly on that when the actual chokes come in. That's one of the things that's holding it up is we're waiting for magnetics. So anyway, and I guess I kind of undershot the weight on those. I guess they're 57 pounds each. So the magnetics are significant. That's probably about 80% of the weight of the product right there. So we're waiting for that. We'll do our final test, put on the AP and see what it's at. At the worst, it's going to be 208, 350 into 4. At best, it'll be 200 into 8, 300 into 4. And in terms of sound, it is it's Azure on steroids. It's like Azure with bass. It's kind of unlike anything we've ever done. It's really hard to describe, but it's a good compliment. If you like the less is more sound, you'll probably really like the tier sound.
We're getting near the end of things here, but this is a kind of an interest. I'm not familiar with this, but someone is asking, why does my DAC sound better if I leave it on? It does noticeably better when left on for a long time. Any streamers in the future of DAC? So my question for you is, have you ever noticed a DAC sounding better if you leave it on for longer? Why that might be? And this question gets answered quite often, but ask it one more time anyways for fun.
Yeah.
Streamers.
No, I tend to leave mine on because it doesn't use up that much power, and I do actually think it sounds better, over time. I don't know why. Mike will say, oh, it's the inherent linearity is specified at a certain temperature, and you'd think the chip would reach that temperature pretty quickly, but I don't know. There's a lot of audio stuff that's voodoo. And you're never going to break it down into A or B answers. And if you decide, hey, I want to turn on and off my DAC, I'm not going to be offended. I do think it's better to leave them on, but I've been wrong before. So I don't know is the best answer.
And then the streamer question?
Streamer?
The answer is no. He answers it every time. No streamer. Are you designing?
No streamer. But actually, going back to your previous question about the most significant audio advancement since I became an engineer, yeah, streaming, absolutely. Streaming turn the old joke about audiophiles, where there are people that have $70,000 in gear and 7 records. That was the stereotype, because it's like you have 7 really good sounding recordings that you listen to over and over again on way overpriced gear. That used to be the stereotype. Now it's like, for under $20 a month, sometimes a lot less than $20 a month, I have access to more music than I can listen to in my lifetime. That's a huge difference. That there's no arguing that is the most significant change ever in audio. Does that mean it's the best sounding? Well, Mike's going to argue with you about that. I use streaming a lot. Mike likes his CDs. He likes his records, things like that. But I don't think there's any arguing that's the most significant difference. So, but are we going to do a streamer? Absolutely not. But that will never happen.
Just to ask this again, because I found it very interesting last time, for the Raspberry Pi, they make these little, whatever they call them, the shell. Yeah. There's no matching shell. You guys will in there and then have it match with the Schiit stack?
No, it's not our thing. If you guys want something like that, it's probably best to look at the guys I mentioned before, David's company, Snake Oil Cables also does a small streamer that's in the same form factor as the Magnum Modi.
So looking back on your life, I feel like this is like the closing statement. Anything you kind of want to mention before we wrap up here?
No, I'm ready to die right now. I think that really the challenge is, continuing to do some really cool stuff in audio, but not streamers. And to keep seeing what we can do. And I think we can do that for a long time, but not streamers, not stuff with UIs, not stuff with software. Please, let's stay away from that.
All right, I think that's gonna kind of wrap us up. Jason, that was excellent. Thank you so much, and I think that's it.
Well, thank you for talking to me. Thank you for listening to me. And yeah, hopefully we do this again. I think next month you get Mike, but yeah, maybe you get Mike unplugged, unfiltered. Oh boy. Get the bleeping ready.
Cheers.
See ya.